January 1066. England stands at a crossroads. Its king is dead, the throne is empty, and the most powerful man in the realm, Harold Godwinson, has just been crowned. But his crown comes with a curse. 3 men across the seas claim it is rightfully theirs. In the months that follow, Harold will face betrayals, invasions, and battles that will decide the fate of a kingdom. From the rolling hills of Wessex to the blood-soaked fields of Hastings, this is the story of England's last Anglo-Saxon king and the year that changed history forever. Welcome to History Snob. Harold Godwinson's upbringing was steeped in both privilege and political tension. Born around 1022 to Godwin, Earl of Wessex, and Githa Thorkelsdottir, he was part of one of the most influential families in England. His father was close friends with King Canute, who ruled England, Denmark, and Norway in the early 11th century. This ensured that Harold grew up in an environment where the affairs of the realm were constant dinner table conversation. Through his mother's Danish noble lineage, Harold was connected to Scandinavian royalty, a heritage that gave him credibility in an England still shaped by Viking invasions and settlement. As we'll see, the Vikings would play a huge part in the downfall of the future king. From an early age, Harold was trained in the duties of a nobleman, military skills, estate management, diplomacy, and the ability to read the complex moods of court politics. Growing up in Wessex, England's wealthiest region, Harold would have encountered a steady stream of visiting envoys, warriors, and churchmen, all of which helped him develop the worldly understanding and adaptability that became trademarks of his later rule. Harold also had many siblings, several of whom held earldoms, creating a network of family influence that crisscrossed England. This network would prove vital to his rise. By his 20s, Harold had begun to distinguish himself as a competent leader and a man trusted with significant responsibilities, marking him as his father's likely successor. In his personal life, Harold was known for his charisma, generosity, and physical prowess. He formed a long-term partnership with Edith Swanwick, also known as Edith the Fair, a wealthy and well-connected noblewoman. While their union was likely a handfasting, a form of marriage recognized by Danish custom but not by the church, it was enduring and produced several children. His domestic arrangements reflected both personal affection and political strategy, as Edith's family brought Harold valuable land and alliances. Later in his life, he would also marry Olgith, sister of 2 powerful earls from the north, to secure political unity during his reign. These relationships, both romantic and strategic, reveal Harold as a man who blended personal loyalty with calculated alliance building. In other words, an ideal medieval king, or so you would think. Harold Godwinson inherited the earldom of Wessex in 1053 after the death of his father Godwin, one of the most powerful men in England. Godwin had been a dominant political figure under both King Canute and Edward the Confessor, controlling vast lands in southern England and wielding enormous influence at court. When Godwin suddenly collapsed and died, reportedly during a royal banquet, Harold was already well positioned to step into his father's shoes. But this was a situation fraught with danger. Being the son of a nobleman in the 11th century wasn't as easy as you might expect. At the time, inheritance of an earldom in Anglo-Saxon England was not purely hereditary like later medieval titles. It required both royal approval and the acceptance of the Witenagemot, the Council of Nobles and Clergy. Harold's appointment was not automatic, but he had strong advantages. He was Godwin's eldest surviving son, already experienced in administration and warfare, and popular among thegns, local nobles, in Wessex. Crucially, King Edward agreed to grant him the position, possibly as a way to maintain stability in a region that was England's richest and most strategically important. By the time Harold Godwinson inherited the earldom of Wessex, he was already a seasoned nobleman shaped by years of military service, political maneuvering, and exposure to the shifting alliances of the Anglo-Saxon court. His early adulthood had been spent alongside his father, participating in campaigns and diplomatic missions that gave him first-hand experience in both warfare and statecraft. But things could change quickly in the medieval world, and possessing power and wealth attracts enemies. The Godwin family's power was vast, but not without controversy. Edward the Confessor's mistrust of the family led to their temporary exile in 1051, an episode that forced Harold to navigate the perilous politics of survival. The Godwins returned to England the following year, triumphantly restored to favour, and Harold's loyalty to both his family and the realm during this crisis helped cement his reputation as a capable and steadfast leader. Once established as Earl of Wessex, Harold's influence spread quickly. His territories were among the richest and most strategically important in England, covering much of the south and including vital ports and trade routes. He proved himself a shrewd governor, ensuring stability and prosperity in his lands while building alliances with other powerful nobles. Harold was also a warrior of repute. His military leadership came to the forefront in the early 1060s during the long-running conflicts with the Welsh ruler Griffith of Llywelyn. In 1063, Harold led a decisive campaign with his brother Tostig that resulted in Griffith's death and the fragmentation of Welsh resistance, securing England's western frontier. These victories enhanced Harold's prestige as a commander who could both defend the realm and expand its influence. Diplomatically, Harold became indispensable to King Edward. He often acted as the king's chief advisor and problem solver, managing disputes between fractious earls and representing loyal authority in regions far from the court. His family connections through marriage, land, and kinship gave him a political network that no other English noble could match. By the mid-1060s, Harold was not just the wealthiest and most powerful earl in England, but effectively the second in command of the kingdom. However, his growing prominence also stirred rivalries, including tensions with his own brother Tostig, whose harsh rule in Northumbria led to rebellion in 1065. When the Northumbrians demanded Tostig's removal, Harold supported their wishes, prioritizing national stability over family loyalty. This decision not only ended his brother's earldom, but also turned Tostig into a bitter enemy, a choice that would have serious consequences in 1066. By the end of 1065, Harold was the clear favorite to succeed the aging and childless Edward the Confessor. He had military victories, political skill, popular support, and control of the most powerful earldom in the realm. When Edward died on January 5, 1066, the Witenagemot elected Harold as king the very next day, seeing him as the only man strong enough to defend England from external threats. Yet his rapid rise to the throne would immediately trigger the most turbulent and final chapter of his life. Harold had a serious problem right from the start, a problem that started 2 years earlier when he crossed paths with the man who would undo him. In 1064, Harold traveled to Normandy. Accounts differ as to why, where he met William, Duke of Normandy. The Norman chroniclers, especially William of Poitiers, claimed Harold was sent by King Edward the Confessor to confirm that William would be Edward's heir. English sources are less certain. Some suggest Harold's trip was a personal mission, possibly to negotiate the release of family members who had been held in Normandy since the Godwin family's exile in 1051. Whatever the purpose, Harold's voyage went badly wrong. His ship was blown off course and wrecked on the coast of Poitiers, a small but fiercely independent county in northern France. The local Guy of Poitiers, captured Harold and held him as a high-value prisoner, an aristocratic hostage who could be ransomed for profit. If this sounds a little mean, well, it wasn't such a strange practice in the medieval world. Sometimes the line between guest and prisoner could be a bit blurry if the guest or prisoner was rich and powerful. News of Harold's capture reached Duke William, who stepped in and demanded that Guy release Harold into his custody. While this might sound like a rescue, it was really more like a prisoner transfer. Harold passed into William's care, and William was not a man to trifle with. Although William had inherited the title Duke of Normandy from his father, he had been born out of wedlock. His father may have been a duke, but his mother was the daughter of a lowly tanner. As a result of this, William had faced revolt from some of his own lords. During one siege, the defenders of a rebellious town put animal pelts on the battlements and shouted to William, "We have hides for the tanner's son." When he captured them, he had the offenders' hands and feet lopped off as punishment. In general, William had fought brutally against his rebellious nobles, laying waste to swaths of Normandy and depopulating whole regions to prevent future trouble. In short, William was not someone to mess with. In 1064, the mighty Harold found himself at the mercy of a man who had fought and scraped for his power, and was hungry for even more. At first, things went reasonably well for Harold. William treated him with outward courtesy, but made it clear that he was not free to leave. During Harold's stay in Normandy, William took him on a military expedition against rebels in Brittany, apparently to test his loyalty and skill in battle. Harold fought bravely, which seemed to please William. But the real drama came later when William allegedly forced Harold to swear a solemn oath. According to Norman accounts, Harold swore on holy relics hidden beneath a cloth to recognize William as Edward's rightful successor to the English throne and to support his claim when Edward died. The story goes that only after Harold swore this oath did William reveal the relics, magnifying the sacred binding of the promise. The English sources are more skeptical, either downplaying the oath or implying Harold was coerced. From their perspective, an oath made under duress was not morally binding. Whatever the truth, when Harold was elected king in 1066, William felt he had been robbed of the throne to which he was entitled. And so, from the moment he was crowned on January 6th, Harold's position was under threat from rival claimants who wanted to take his crown. The first and most immediate threat came from William, Duke of Normandy, who sat just on the other side of the English Channel, preparing an invasion to seize England from his former prisoner/friend. But the first threat Harold had to deal with actually came from somewhere more unexpected. Harald Hardrada, the formidable king of Norway, also declared himself the rightful king of England. Hardrada argued that an earlier agreement between a former English king Harthacnut and Norwegian king Magnus the Good gave him the true claim to the throne. Hardrada soon found an ally in Harold's exiled brother, Tostig, who was eager for revenge after Harold had supported his removal from the earldom of Northumbria. For months after his coronation, Harold mobilized England's defences, summoning the Fyrd, England's militia, and positioning ships along the south coast to repel a Norman landing. This watch dragged on through the summer of 1066, but when supplies ran low and the Fyrd's term of service expired, Harold reluctantly disbanded much of his army in early September. The timing could not have been worse. On September 20th, Hardrada and Tostig landed in the north with a powerful Norwegian fleet. They defeated the local forces of Earls Morcar and Edwin at the Barrel of Fulford, capturing York and forcing the city's submission. Harold reacted with extraordinary speed, marching his army over 300 kilometers from London to Yorkshire in just 4 days. He caught Hardrada and Tostig by surprise at the Battle of Stamford Bridge on September 25th. The fighting was fierce, but Harold's forces decisively defeated the invaders. Both Hardrada and Tostig were killed, and the surviving Norwegians were allowed to leave after swearing never to return. This victory ended the Viking threat to England once and for all, but it came at a cost. Harold's army was exhausted, and within days came the devastating news. William of Normandy had landed in Sussex on September 28th. Without time to rest or reorganize, Harold immediately turned his army south, covering the same punishing distance back to the south in less than 2 weeks. On October 14, 1066, Harold faced William's forces at the Battle of Hastings, one of the most famous and shortest in history. The English army took up a strong defensive position on a hill, forming a shield wall that withstood repeated Norman cavalry charges for most of the day. However, a combination of feigned retreats and attrition began to break Harold's line. Late in the afternoon, Harold was killed, traditionally said to have been struck in the eye with an arrow, though contemporary accounts differ. With his death, English resistance collapsed and William secured victory. Harold's fall at Hastings marked the end of Anglo-Saxon rule in England and ushered in a new era under the rule of William, who came to be known as William the Conqueror, one of the most famous English kings. In less than a year, Harold Godwinson had gone from the realm's most powerful noble to its last native king, facing and defeating one foreign invasion before falling to another. His short reign is remembered for its relentless pace, heroic defense of the realm, and the dramatic turning point it represented in English history. That's all for this video. Do you feel sorry for Harold Godwinson? Or do you think he really did make and break a legitimate oath? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to History Snob for more cool historical content. Thanks for watching.